Hey, so today I'm going to be making a full Dungeons and Dragons character with you. So if you're new to the game, if it's the first time you're making a character and you just want to see what the process is and you want to have someone lead you through how to do it, this is exactly the video for you. For obvious intellectual property reasons, I won't be showing the player's handbook, but I highly recommend you follow along. I tell you which pages to look at if you want to follow what I am doing. It won't be exactly what you have to do because obviously I'm going to make some choices which you might want to derive from, but it will give you a good idea of how to make a character on your own. So what you're gonna need is a character sheet, 4d6 or whatever the method your dungeon master will allow to make your statistics. I like 4d6. I like to roll dice, so that's my favorite method. And for the sake of this video, I'll be using this little chart, let's say right here, to lead me through the choices. So this is not scripted, this is not prepared. We're just gonna make some choices with the dice actually, and see where it leads us. So it might not be the most optimized character, let's say, but it will give you a good idea of how to make it, and that's the important part for me. So let us start now with the actual character creation. So if you open up your player's handbook, and the first section is actually going to be the character creation. If we flip to the first chapter, the first thing you're gonna have to do is choose a race. So you can open up your player's handbook to do so at page 17. So chapter 2, page 17 will be the races. Now, when you choose a race, what you should think about is how it will complement with your class. Different classes do different things and use different key abilities, key statistics. So your race should complement that. For example, barbarians use strength as their main ability. Well, a class that could complement that very nicely is the half-orc. A race that complements that class nicely is the half-orc, because the half-orc, if we go to that page, let me find it, to page 40, the half-orc gives you an ability score increase of 2 in your strength, and that's going to be the most useful for you. For a wizard, intelligence is going to be the key ability. A half-orc may not be the best choice to make that work, but you can choose whatever race and class you want, and it doesn't have to be optimized, but you might want to make those two choices fit together. So I have my race list right here. These are only the ones included in the player's handbook. I'm not going over all of the possible races today. We're just gonna keep those at 10, I believe. Maybe 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, keep those 9. So what I'll do is I'll roll this percentile die and see what race we're gonna work with. 32, that's gonna be a halfling. So I'm gonna write that down right here. Halfling. So the halfling. Let's roll our class and our stat, and then we'll start filling out everything our race and class give us. For now, let's just start rolling to make some decisions. So our class, so there are 12 classes included in the player's handbook, so these are the ones we're going to be working with. I'm simply going to roll a d12 to see what we get. So that's a 5, so that's going to be a fighter. Halfling fighter, that's interesting. I'm pretty sure we can make that work. There we go. Halfling fighter. We'll roll the background later. For now, let's just roll our 4d6 to roll our stats. So how the 4d6 method works is you roll all 4 dice and then add up the 3 highest numbers you get. So in this case, I would remove the 3 and add up 5, 4, and 4. So that's going to give me a 13. What I like to do is just write this number down in the margin like this to keep track of it. And you're going to repeat this 5 more times until you have 6 different numbers. Well, they don't all have to be different, but until you have 6 numbers. So now that's 5, 5, and 4. So that's going to be a 14. We keep rolling. Ooh, that's not good. That's going to be a very weak stat for us. So that's a 6. If I were a dungeon master and this was actually a character that the player was rolling up, I might allow a 6 to be re-rolled because it's very low. But since this is not going to be a real character, let's just leave that there for now. Okay, now that's better. That's going to compensate for it. So 6, 6, and 5, so that's going to be 17. 17. Okay, 2 more times and we'll be done with the rolling for the stats. Not too shabby, so that's 14. And our last one. Okay, we end on a decent note, so we have 12 right there. So that's not too bad. Considering the other ones we got, the 6 will be a flaw, will definitely be a weakness, but the character itself shouldn't be too weak. So that's not bad. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, as a fighter, you're going to want to put your main stat in either strength or dexterity because that's what you're going to use to attack. Now, with the halfling, I believe you get a dexterity boost. So that might be where I want. Yes, so if you look at page 28 of your player's handbook, you'll have the halfling traits. And you'll see that your dexterity score increases by 2. So I think we're gonna put our 17 in dexterity and raise it by 2 for a 19. And that's gonna amount to a +4 modifier. Now, what I'm gonna do now is roll to see what is next for our character. So let's get a d6. So I'm gonna see first what is our flaw. That's gonna be very interesting. I like to proceed that way, just putting the highest number in the stat that's most useful for me, for my class, but then proceed to choose what's my weakness, because that tells a lot about the character. If you have a character that's very agile but gets sick easily and has a low constitution, well, that's gonna shape how they fight. They're probably going to want to fight from a distance. They might be a little bit more afraid to go into battle, more afraid to get injured during battle. So that's gonna influence a lot how the character plays. But if that same character that is very agile has instead a low wisdom, well, in that case they might go into fights more often and not consider their option with as much calm and reason, and that might lead them to make bad decisions. So the weakness will really shape a lot how your character plays, maybe even more so than your main ability. So we're gonna roll our d6 and see what is going to be our weakness. So if I get dexterity, of course I'm just gonna re-roll, but 5. So in this case our 6 is going to go into wisdom. So let's put that there. So that's gonna be a -2 for wisdom. Now we have our 17 and our 6 decided. So we have 2 14s, a 12 and a 13. So what I think we're gonna want to do is put our 13 either in Constitution or Charisma, because the Halfling subraces can give a boost of 1 in one of these, and that's gonna allow us to round it up to a 14. So our 12 is gonna be pretty much the one thing we want to really place somewhere that's gonna make a difference. So let's roll to see where our 12 goes. 4, so that would be intelligence. So 12 is gonna go into intelligence. That's gonna be a +1. Now we're gonna have a 14 in strength. And we're gonna make our choice of either the Lightfoot Halfling or the Stout Halfling to see which stat gets a bonus between Constitution and Charisma. I could already put down 14 because I know it's gonna end up being a 14 either way for these two, but let's just take a look at the Halfling for a moment and we'll come back to the stats when we choose our subrace. So open up your player's handbook at page 28 if you aren't already there and you want to follow along. So if you look at page 28, the Halfling traits. So the first one is your dexterity score increases by 2, which we already did. Then a few of these informations are more roleplay, geared towards the roleplay. So the age and alignment will tell you how you can envision your character as a living person. So halfling reach adulthood at the age of 20 and generally live into the middle of their second century. Their alignment, they are usually lawful good. Now the size can be interesting. I don't think on this sheet I have a particular place to put the size, but halfling are small. They are considered small enough to be in a different category than the regular humanoids, who are medium. The speed is 25 feet, so we can put that right here, 25. And we have our first ability or trait, lucky. So I'm gonna put down lucky right here. So lucky, when you roll a 1 on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die and must use the new roll. So that's an ability that you have as a halfling. Now, you may not play a halfling, you may decide to take another race, that's fine, but whatever you have as traits that give you a specific ability, just put them there in your features and traits to remember that you have them, that you can use them. The second one we have is brave, which gives you advantage on saving throws against being frightened. Pretty simple to understand. And the last one is halfling nimbleness, which allows you to move through the space of any creature larger than you. So halfling nimbleness, which is very useful in combat to reposition. Alright, so that's what you get with a standard halfling. We also have the languages. I'm not going to go in detail over the different languages, but just choose whatever you get. And the subrace now. So there are two subraces of halflings, the Lightfoot and the Stout. So the first one, Lightfoot can hide behind people. That's their little trick. So what they get is a charisma score increase and the naturally stealthy ability, which allow you to hide behind creature that are one size larger than yours, or at least one size larger than yours. The second subrace is the Stout, who are more, well, stout. They get a constitution score increase of 1 and gain the Stout resilience, which gives them advantage on saving throws against poison, and gives them resistance also against poison damage. In this case, it might be more advantageous, I think, for a fighter to take the Stout route. You could go either way, depending on how you want to play, but considering we have low wisdom, I really see this character as always going into battle and always being on the front line and not really being well reasonable with their choices of fights. So I think being able to get poison and resist it might be a bit more advantageous for them. So I'm gonna put the stout resilience right here as we choose the stout subrace. So our constitution is going to be 14. That's going to be a +2. Our charisma is also going to be 14. That's also going to be a +2 because we put our 13 in constitution and raise it by 1. And that does it for our race and stats. That's a +2 right here, +2. So we have our stats. We have the abilities and traits given to us by our race. The next thing you're going to move on to is your class abilities. So in this case, we have the fighter class. We're going to need to go... what page is the fighter? Let me see. Yeah, okay, so page 70 for the fighter. So when you choose a class, I highly recommend you just read all of the information. But here's what you're mainly gonna get. So at level 1, if you start at level 1, your proficiency bonus is +2. Proficiency is a term used to talk about the things you are good at. So you might be naturally very dexterous, but maybe you have a background of training into athletics and being a very athletic person. In that case, you would be very good at tasks that require strength, but specifically strength related to athletics. In that case, you'll use your strength, but you'll also add the proficiency bonus, in this case +2. That represents your previous training or the things you are better at, not naturally from your just physical form and state of mind, but the things you have learned to master. So, if you start at level 1, you have a proficiency bonus of +2. So if we go to page 71 and look at the class feature, the first thing you're going to see is your hit points. So first, you have hit dice. So the fighter has 1d10 hit dice at level 1. And every level you gain a new hit dice, which you can use for different uses, mainly during short rest, but that's going to be for another time. Next, hit points at first level. So that's of great interest for us. So we have 10 plus your constitution modifier. For us, that's going to be a +2. So we start with 12 hit points. There we go. And hit points at higher levels will become relevant whenever you level up. But for today, that won't be the case. Next, we have your proficiencies, the things you have learned to master. So first, you have all armors and shields. That's going to allow you to wear pretty much anything you want to protect yourself. For the weapons, we have simple weapons and martial weapons. So simple and martial weapons. As a fighter, you know how to use pretty much anything you want in a fight. That's your thing. You're good at fighting. Now your saving throws. So you have proficiency in strength. Oop, and constitution. So for strength, you're going to take your modifier +2, and since you're proficient, you're going to add the proficiency bonus of +2. That's going to give us a +4. If you don't have proficiency, you simply put down whatever your statistics is. So that's going to be +4 for dexterity. For constitution, we have another +4. Intelligence, that's +1. Wisdom is -2. And charisma is +2. There we go. So once you have your saving throws proficiency, you can simply put down whatever you get. And skills, so you can choose 2 skills from acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, and survival. In this case, I'm gonna go quickly. I think acrobatics for someone who's very dexterous can be very nice. And let's give him some perception. That's always useful. There we go. So for the skills, same thing as saving throws. You can simply put down the modifier associated to the stats of the skill. So it's always right next to the skill. So acrobatics, you use dex. So you can simply put down the modifier, and if you have proficiency, add +2 to that modifier. I won't fill those out. It will take some time. Not really necessary today, but just so you know, in this case, acrobatics, for an example, I would have a +6, +4 for dexterity, +2 for proficiency. But animal handling, I would have a -2, as that is my wisdom modifier. And so on and so forth. You'll also get skills from your background, which we'll get to after the class. Now, after your proficiencies, we get to the equipment. So first you start with either a chainmail or a leather armor, longbow, and 20 arrows. So the first decision for the fighter is, do you want to go range, or do you want to go close quarter combat and melee? This halfling, I think, is very brave and is just going to go into battle. So I see him as close quarters and melee. So we're going to take the chainmail. Now, for the second, you choose a martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martial weapons. I think the shield is going to be useful, so let's take the shield. And to look at weapons, you're gonna go into, I believe it's chapter 5 for equipment. So yes, it's chapter 5, and let's take a look at specifically the weapons for right now. So weapons are at page 149. You can see what you have access to. So for melee weapons, you can just look at a list and see what you think would fit best for your character. In that case, giving him a shield and seeing how he's a halfling, I think something like a longsword might be the most appropriate. Something too big would be maybe comical, but might give some disadvantages because of its small size. And the longsword is held in one hand, which will let our halfling have the shield in the other and give some decent damage. So I think that's going to be the most appropriate weapon for us. So let's put down the longsword. So let's go over the attack bonuses as we are looking at weapons. Since you are proficient with the longsword, actually, no, let's use a weapon that used dexterity. That's my bad. I forgot we had a better dexterity. So I think in that case, the rapier might be a better choice. Yes, the rapier will be our choice, because the rapier can use dexterity for the attack. So, most weapons use strength to attack, but if you have a weapon with finesse, you can use your dexterity instead. Rapier is one of them. So you're gonna take your appropriate modifier, in our case R+4 for dexterity, and since we are proficient with martial weapons, we'll also add our proficiency bonus, which means our attack bonus will be a +6. There we go. For the damage, we just look at the rapier and we can see it deals 1d8 damage, and you can also add the appropriate modifier to the damage. So in that case, a +4. And there you have your weapon. You're gonna do the same thing every time you get a new weapon. So that's it for our first weapon. Let's look at the armors while we are looking at equipment. Page 145, you can see a list of the armors and of the bonuses they give you. So in this case, we have a chainmail armor, which will give us a 16 armor class, but we also have a shield that will raise that by 2. So that's going to bring it to an 18 armor class. The armor class represents how hard you are to hit. The higher the armor class, the harder you are to hit when enemies try to attack you. So that's it for the armors. Alright, now let's go back to our fighter equipment and see what we get from our class. So we got our chainmail, we got our martial weapon with a shield. Next, if we go back to page 72, we can also get a light crossbow and 20 bolts or 2 hand axes. I think the light crossbow will be more interesting. So, light crossbow. This will also get a +6 because ranged weapon use dexterity, And the light crossbow also deals 1d8 plus 4. This being said, the light crossbow will require 2 hands to use, so whenever we want to use it, we'll have to take off our shield. Just a little note, if ever you're thinking of what you want as equipment, you have to think of how many hands you have. And last but not least, we have a pack of our choice between the Dungeoneer's pack and the Explorer's pack. Won't make a big difference in this case, but I like to take the Explorer's pack personally. So that's what I'm gonna pick this time. The packs will come with a plethora of different items, which you can look at once again in chapter 5 of your player's handbook. Now we go to the fighting style. So you have different choices, which will kind of tell you how your character prefers to fight. So archery will be very good for anyone fighting from a distance. Defense is great for someone in the thick of it, trying to be the target of the enemy. Dueling is great if you are holding only one weapon and you want to go for a damage build. Great weapon fighting, on the other hand, is great if you use big weapon that you hold in both hands. That will give you more damage and will make you more consistent with your damage. Protection will allow you to protect your allies if you want to be more of a defender and you want to give some utility and help the people around you. You'll need a shield for this one. And the last one, 2 weapon fighting. If you fight with 2 weapons, you can make a strike with each, but the second strike usually doesn't add your ability modifier as a regular strike would, but with 2 weapon fighting, you can. In this case, I think we'll go for defense, as our little guy will often find themselves in situations that are a bit more than he can chew. So being hard to hit might save his life. So we add 1 to our armor class, bringing it to 19. We also get a second ability at level 1, which is called Second Wind. If you're still playing on paper, what I like to do for abilities that have a limited number of views is make a little box in which I separate the number of views the maximum numbers of views I have and the current numbers of views I still have. For Second Wind, you can regain 1d10 plus your fighter level hit points as a bonus action, but you can do so only once, and you will regain the ability during a short rest. So what I like to do is make this little box with a pen, make the inside with a pencil, which means I can just erase, and when I use it I can just take that off and put a 0, or I can make a check mark if I only have one ability, one use of the ability. So that's the second ability we get as a level 1 fighter, and that's going to be it for our class. At this point we're almost done with what we have to do to make a completely mechanistically playable character. There's still this little box that has nothing in it, initiative. Unless stated otherwise by your class or your race, your initiative modifier is equal to your dexterity modifier. So you can just put the same thing. In our case, that's a +4. Now, the last mechanical element that you have to do to create your character is choose a background. The background tells you what you are doing before you went on an adventure. Maybe you were a simple merchant, or maybe you were a soldier already. Maybe you were more on the criminal side, or maybe you were an outlander and just you were roaming all your life before you found a party of adventurers who took you in. It's a very nice element that combines roleplay with game mechanics, giving you a little bit of both. So let's take back my little chart right here and look at the backgrounds. Now I selected 10 of those, but there are 13 in the player's handbook. But for the sake of this exercise, I'm just gonna roll 1d10. 1d10 and choose the background and go over with you what you get from the backgrounds and where to write all of those choices down. So let's see, 7. So a 7, that's interesting. So for a fighter, that's not a usual choice, but hey, unusual is not bad. So we have the sage background. A sage is someone with a lot of knowledge, who studied a lot. And maybe for our fighter, that means they studied the art of war. And that can make an interesting twist on a plain old fighter, someone who just uses a sword to go by and to earn money and maybe do some mercenary work. Well, that's being a sage, a scholar, gives a good twist on that and tells us that he's not just a simple fighter. Maybe he knows more than he lets you know at first glance. So let's go see the sage background. That's gonna be on page on page 137. So once again, I highly recommend you just look at those and read them and choose what works best for your character. But the first thing the sage gives you is 2 skill proficiencies, one in Arcana and one in History. Languages, you get 2 additional languages of your choice, which we won't go over for now. And the equipment, a lot of that equipment is roleplay elements, so I won't bother to write them all down, but you get a ball of black ink, a quill, small knife, a letter from a dead colleague posing a question you have not yet been able to answer, a set of common clothes, and a belt pouch containing 10 gold pieces. So that's going to be your starting money, unless you are unless otherwise stated by your dungeon master. You can put them down in this little GP box. GP stands for gold pieces. You can also then choose a specialty. So some of them that are suggested are alchemist, astronomer, discredited academic, librarian, professor, researcher, wizard's apprentice, or scribe. In my case, I like to go for the idea of this student of war theory, which is not in the suggested choices, but I'll go for that because that seems very interesting for my fighter. Next, you get a feature, researcher. So you can put it down in your features and trait. When you attempt to learn or recall a piece of lore, if you do not know the information, you have to know where and from whom you can obtain it. So the dungeon master will usually tell you, unless the knowledge is too obscure, where you think you might be able to find it, and give you just a lead on where to find that. So I very much like this feature, which is very much geared towards roleplay, but really helps. It can really help in your adventure in a great way. Especially if you have a mystery on your hands, knowing where to find information about it can be of great use. And then at the end of the background, you get suggested characteristics. These are little helpers to start thinking about your character in a roleplay light. They're just suggestions, you don't have to follow them, but they might give you a bit of inspiration. Maybe you think you see one of them and you go like, oh, that's interesting. So if we go in the personality traits, look at number 4, there's nothing I like more than a good mystery. That can inform a lot about how your character thinks, and that can be something that's easy to play on if you're not used to role-playing. Just having this little idea of, oh, if there's a mystery, I'm just gonna try to follow it and to solve it. You have the same things for ideals, bonds, and flaws. But once again, they're just guidelines. They're just little pieces of inspiration if you need them to make your character. And with that, you have a fully functional character, except for one very important roleplay aspect, which is the name. So in terms of mechanics, you got everything you need, but you really need a name, or at least something you go by. If you don't want to have a name per se, you really need something the other people can designate you with, because that's, even if you wouldn't want a name, people would give you a name anyway. So just choose a little something to go for your character, and think about like what's their gender. That's always a good point to start if you're looking for a name. What's their race can also inform you. In the races of the player's handbooks, there are usually suggested names for females and males of that race, or just guidelines on how to find a name. And you can think about that. In this case, I'm not going to bother to find a name for this fictional character, but choose a name and you'll have everything you need to start your adventure. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a longer video than what I'm used to doing, but I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments, if it was useful, if it was relaxing, if it was a better ASMR or a better just guide to making a character, or if it was good at both, which I really hope so. And on that, I hope you have a great time playing your first games, and I'll see you next time.